Welcome to Picture Book Assignment 2, Text and Images. Picture books are powerful. They can tell stories. What we're going to do in this next video is consider the relationship between words and images as they occur in picture books. And of course, this is going to lead us to another design challenge. We're going to design a storyboard like we did before, but this time inserting some text to go along with our images. In literary works, such as picture books, texts are usually evocative. Willie wouldn't hurt a fly. What kind of a story will unfold that begins with this line? A line that tells us in the simplest way the most important thing about the character. Willie wouldn't hurt a fly. This is the opening of Willie the Wimp by Anthony Brown. When Max wore his wolf suit. This is the beginning of Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are. When Max wore his wolf suit, or is the wolf suit wearing him, we can expect some trouble. When I was young in the mountains. Now this one is a refrain that punctuates Cynthia Rylance's nostalgic look back at her girlhood in the Appalachian Mountains in the book by the same name, When I Was Young in the Mountains. Each time the refrain is used, Ryland takes off on a simple but vivid recollection of something that she experienced. The refrain acts like a meditation tool, a frame within which something special will be revealed to us. John Patrick Norman Mackenzie set off along the road to learn. This is another refrain with a very different effect. In this book by John Birmingham, we learn of the boy with this impressive name repeatedly encountering adventures and then having them denied by a punishing and tyrannical teacher. In the end, it is the teacher who has to learn a real lesson. Mom, will you take me swimming? Not today, Adam. I'm busy. An opening line that immediately captures a situation that is all too familiar to many children, I suspect. The adult, the significant other they mostly rely on, are not always receptive to their needs and wants, and the story sort of explores this predicament. Okay, so all these texts are the openings of a picture book, and with very few words they're able to spark off feelings, expectations and familiar situations that can arrest the reader barely before the picture book has even got going. So let's reflect a little bit on words and their relationship to images when they're used in picture books. The basic rule of thumb in picture books is that words shouldn't replicate what the pictures can do, because that's risking boredom for the reader. Secondly, words should do what the pictures can't do, and vice versa. In this example, from Where the Wild Things Are, there is movement in the words that the pictures can't express. The wild things roared their terrible roars, and gnashed their terrible teeth, and rolled their terrible eyes, and showed their terrible claws, and so on. All the terribleness of it all is intensified by the repetition of the sound. Pictures can't do that. However, pictures do speak 1,000 words, so it's hard to imagine Where the Wild Things Are without conjuring up Sendak's monsters and the atmospheric landscape in which they appear. So though pictures can tell a narrative, words can help us with the sequencing of the narrative. Snow is falling, the field mice are sleeping, now they open their eyes, they sniff, the field mice sniff. Words tend to replicate the natural time sequence of events without subplots. And this is how the text behaves in John Birmingham's Grandpa, a story about the loving relationship between a grandfather and his grandchild near the end of his life. Yet within the book there are a number of specially drawn pictures that represent a series of flashback from Grandpa's life, his own childhood, as memories triggered by being with his daughter. Similarly, in Pat Hutchinson's Rosie's Walk, the narrative that is conveyed in the text is fairly straightforward, and actually here is the complete text that is in the book. But as Rosie goes for her walk, she's being pursued by a fox who appears in every picture, only his pursuit always comes to a bad end for him. In the picture at the bottom you see a rake hits him in the nose. Interestingly, this subplot is completely told in pictures and never mentioned in the text. It's as though you're reading two stories at the same time, that they're being told simultaneously, and the reader sort of gets the feeling that Rosie is sublimely aware of the full picture, just as but maybe not the fox. So anyway, the relationship between the text and the image is can be pretty sophisticated. The less is more principle usually applies to texts. Often the texts in picture books are poetic in the sense that the texts say only what they need to say, and with great economy. For example, that was not a nice thing to say to Grandpa. This is the only caption on a double-page spread in Birmingham's Grandpa book. What was said, how it happened to be said, why it was said, and so on, is never explicitly revealed to us. It's up to us to use our imagination. It's as though Birmingham only wants us to focus on the crisis in the relationship, which hopefully gets resolved actually, rather than its details, which are kind of trivial by comparison. Oh, Willie. Oh, Millie. You're my hero, Willie, said Millie. Oh, Millie, said Willie. Willie turns out to be courageous after all in Anthony Brown's Willie the Wimp. This doesn't go unnoticed by an admirer, and we have this exchange as a parody of romantic love that in the context of the whole book is nevertheless quite touching. He was a mouse in a land of lions. This line seems to speak volumes to me and gets us to be inquisitive about the mouse's world. Sholovitz's book Dawn is very meditative and gets us into a mood that is very receptive to the details of the natural world. But it started off with field notes like this. Now, I'm not going to read this, but I'll let you have a look at some of it. It's very detailed. Well, Sholowitz reduces it all to this. And here actually is the complete text for the book. So he's taken his field notes, very careful, very detailed observations of dawn, and then from that draft he condensed it down to this. It actually works without images. But when you read the book with the images, there's a surprise that only the images can evoke. And I'm not going to explain what that is. You have to actually look at the book. Finally, though musicality has only been slightly mentioned, it's worth really thinking about. Words produce a wonderful music that, of course, pictures can't do. Let's see it in action. The field mice are sleeping, the bears are sleeping, the little snails sleep in their shells, and the squirrels sleep in the trees, the groundhogs sleep in the ground. They sniff, they run, they run, they sniff, they run, they stop. This is from The Happy Day by Ruth Krauss with pictures by Mark Simont. The short sentences set up a rhythm that comes to an abrupt stop, and all this echoes the movements of the animals being evoked. So it's a wonderful example of a text doing work that the pictures can't do, and yet the pictures do a wonderfully evocative role too. So it's a great example of text and pictures working together. And we could go on with lots more examples like these that illustrate the musicality of language. In the great green room, and a comb and a brush and a bowl full of mush, and a quiet old lady who was whispering hush. These are taken from Margaret Wise Brown's Goodnight Moon. Tiki tiki tembo, no sarembo, chari ruchi pip, peri pembo. I'm not sure if I said that quite right, but that's a lovely book, Chinese folk tale, called Tiki Tiki Tembo. Makes use of this alliterative refrain, which is the name of one of the characters, and means actually the most wonderful child in the world. You'll have to read the book to find out why this is not a good name for a child. Anyway, when you design your storyboards and experiment with storyboards that have texts, I hope that some of the ideas in this very, very short video will give you some inspiration. So I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Take care.